Good afternoon, everyone. So we are just about to start our second session for today. I'm just gonna be uploading my slides shortly and we'll be right into it. All right, can everyone all see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So as stated before, this session will be streamed to YouTube and the link is in the group. So if you are interested in watching the recording, it is available. So at this point, I just like to reiterate that you can ask your questions in the chat or you can use the raise hand function. I will continue to monitor the chat. So any questions, I'll just go and get right into it. So I would, at this point in time, would like to welcome you all to our afternoon session for our Caribbean Studies Marathon. Right. So the agenda for today is we're going to be looking at the from 2 to 3 or even earlier, we're going to be looking at the impact of societal institutions on Caribbean people, and we're looking at religion. Then from 3 o'clock to 3:15, we'll be looking at a recap of what we have covered in the past paper questions. Then from there, we'll go on to contribution. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. My dog obviously was very excited because we're going to a very exciting topic, which is a contribution of sports to Caribbean development. And from there, we'll be doing a recap session. Lastly, from 4:30 to 5 o'clock, if not sooner, we'll be going and answering and tackling essay writing tips. That was highly demanded by several persons who have reached us today. We want to learn more about doing the essays, so we're going to get right into that. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to now look at the impact of societal institutions on Caribbean people, and this will be religion. The syllabus asks us to look at religion from the African, Asian, European derived, and syncretic religions. The syncretic simply means the religions that would have developed within the Caribbean. This particular topic does not have as many past paper questions. As a matter of fact, I believe it's only one past paper question actually tackles the concept of religion, while there are other questions that look at institutions within the Caribbean but doesn't explicitly specify religion. So it there's no real bank of questions that we're going to be relying on. So we're going to be doing two past paper questions in relation to religion. The first question directly involves the role of religion in the Caribbean society. And the second question was actually requested by the members who were a part of the WhatsApp group. So we're going to look at those two issues now. So let's get it right into it. So we're going to look at the question 6 of the 2007 past paper. That question asks us to assess the extent to which religion continues to dominate the life of the Caribbean. All right, that's the question. Assess the extent to which religion continues to dominate the life of Caribbean people, 30 marks. At this point in time, I'd like to ask anyone, is there anyone here who is a member of a church or regularly goes to church or are part of any other religious bodies? I'm going to ask you to use the raise hand function so we could get your perspective. Awesome. So Lachelle, tell me something, Lachelle. Are you a member of a church or any other religious group? Could you just share your experience?
Well, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to session 2. All right. So, yes, I am a member of the church. And I'm a Christian, so I would run a Christianity. And my experience with being a member of the church is that it helps with how I socialize at school and in the wider society, because it teaches you how to interact with people and how to react also to what someone might do to you. So like for instance, if someone steps on my shoe, then I would just ignore it and forgive them, just like who the Bible teach you that if to turn the other cheek. So it helps with my interaction with people. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Lachelle. And I saw that we had another hand up. Is Tania here?
I'm here.
Yes, Tania. What's your experience with religion like?
Good afternoon, by the way. For religion, it shapes the way we interact with society, the way we behave, or attitude towards life, and we have certain principles and morals that are formed from our religion. So, certain way we speak, talk, eat, dress is based off of our religion as well.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing. So your perspectives actually helps to inform us as to how we go about this question. The subject report specifically says good responses came from candidates who noted the phrase continues to dominate. So we see the key terms here. We are not looking at purely religion and its impact on the society, but whether it continues to dominate life of Caribbean people. And from there, we'll soon get into the experiences with religion. So how we go about answering this question? As you know, we have the introduction, we define our key terms. So what does it mean to continue to dominate? Very, very important, because you have to look at whether religion continues to just influence or is one such influence, or whether it actually involves a total institution of some sorts. So we define dominate, and then we identify the major Caribbean religions. So we're looking at knowledge points here. So once we look at what does it mean to dominate, then we look at the major Caribbean religions. Then after which we outline areas of life that are or not currently influenced by the religion, because this particular question, the 30-mark question, requires you to state your position on a specific matter. All right. Don't underestimate and don't ignore certain key terms. It asks you to assess the extent to which religion continues to dominate the life of Caribbean people. So you have to take a position on it. Do you strongly agree? Do you strongly disagree? Do you think religion has a limited influence on Caribbean people? Do you think that religion is this encompassing force that continues to strongly influence Caribbean people? So state your position in your introduction. Now let's go on to it. So this point, I took these recommendations mainly from the textbooks that were available here, as well as looking at what the examiners or the markers had emphasized was key points to note. So let's see if we have any volunteers here. Let's see here. Is Jade here? Are you hearing us, Jade?
Yes, I am, sir.
Awesome, Jade. Could you read for us the first 2 points?
Okay, so our recommended points. Discuss the assumption that religion dominated lifestyle. Responses outline strengths and weaknesses of the proposition. Discuss more than one religion, that is, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, and Rastafarianism.
Awesome. Thank you, Jade. So let's get into some recommended points as how we tackle this question. So this says, basically, this essay prompt is an assumption. It looks at whether or assesses or suggests that religion continues to dominate life of Caribbean people. You don't have to agree with the prompt. Let me state that. You don't have to agree with the prompt. You can agree with the prompt, you can disagree with the prompt, but it's important, as always, to provide the arguments for and against, to provide both perspectives of it. So you have to tackle that assumption and look at the strengths and the weaknesses, because it's an argument that you're doing. We don't want to be the kinds of persons who are in a debate and you're only showing your side of the story. You want to show the opposite side of the story. It applies for the essays, it applies for relationships, it applies for life. So that's the first step that we have to take. Then secondly, we also have to look at the different religions within the Caribbean, because it explicitly asks a syllabus for Caribbean religions as well as mainstream religions. So I would suggest, if you don't necessarily want to study as many religions, you could probably do 2 mainstream religions and 1 Caribbean religion. So for example, most persons here would be Christians, so they could choose Christianity and Islam, or Christianity and Hinduism, because those are 3 main religions that are practiced within the Caribbean. And then as I go to syncretic religion, one that developed out here, you can look at Rastafarianism. That's not the only religion, though. You could look at voodoo. You could look at Santeria, Cuba. So there are different Caribbean syncretic religions, but I just provide one that most persons are aware of. But you don't have to be limited to that. Then from there, you look at the impact of religion on the daily lives of the people who practice them. So earlier you would have heard that religion is a socializing agent and that it helps to shape our interactions with others. Very important. Also note this phrase, the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum, well, let's see. Let's ask that question. Does anyone have any idea what exactly is the hidden curriculum? We're here for another giveaway. Hidden curriculum, what exactly is it? Yes, Wendy.
Okay, so the hidden curriculum was posited by the Marxists, and it's basically the idea that we are taught things in, like, for example, in school or at church that isn't, it's not, okay, so you go to school to learn math, but you also learn other things that isn't necessarily on the syllabus. So for example, you learn to go to school on time, which prepares you to go to work on time.
Awesome. Great job, Wendy. So the hidden curriculum primarily involves the values that you learn within the education system. However, it can also be applied to the values that you learn in formal institutions. So for example, within the formal religious body, you may learn about a supreme being, you may learn specifically about the customs, but beneath the surface, you're looking at also the values that people may have. So for example, honesty, decency, respect, all of those sorts of values. Additionally, you may look at also how you may learn discipline. So for example, Muslims pray 5 times a day at different intervals throughout the day. So you see how that part where religion, such as Islam, influences those who practice them. All right. So another example, in Islam, you have 5 pillars of Islam, whether it be almsgiving or whether it be undertaking a pilgrimage. So these sorts of beliefs guide the behavior or guide the viewpoints of those who practice them. Then we also can, now since we have discussed the mainstream religions, this question asks you also to look at the syncretic or the local religions. So you can look at the ancestral practices of Obeah or other examples of spirituality. You can look at specific groups like the Spiritual Baptists who tend to be quite animated in their worship forms. So what you can do to simplify the process and make it easier to discuss these questions, you can take your life or someone else's life and then analyze it from different perspectives to see, or if to come to the conclusion whether religion continues to dominate the life of people. So for example, if it dominates the social interactions or dominates the family or it dominates law or the governance structure, then you can see how the argument is. If, for example, you see where previously religion held sway over certain areas, but currently it doesn't, then you know how to argue it from there. So let's move on. All right, so let's look at the other aspect of it. So you can also point out that certain traditional beliefs are losing their holds regionally. All right, that's a typo. So losing their hold regionally. So as it's clear, you don't need to see. One just needs to go on Twitter, and you're seeing people. You're not seeing people posting scriptures on Twitter compared to persons who may be looking at the next outing or the next fest or the next Mocha Fest online. What you're seeing now is a more secularization of people, not necessarily persons becoming more religious, but in fact, persons becoming more secular. And as a result, you see, for example, within Christianity, declining church membership for certain traditional churches, whether it's the Anglicans or the Catholics. So that could support the argument that religion, while it may once have held significant sway, may not hold significant sway in today's society. It could also highlight how religion may not have as much clout or may not have as much influence as it once had, because certain holy days, for example, Sunday, are also being used for shopping days. All right. You could also look at how, or attempt to provide some reasons why religion may not hold as much sway as it once had. For example, when examining any scandal that may happen, take place within a church, this causes persons to lose credibility within the system. You could also look at the fact that there are increasing Western ideals that are coming. When Western ideals does not necessarily emphasize religion in institutions and religion formally in life or in all aspects of life. So you can see how you can justify the arguments for and against, and whichever position that you take on this matter. Then also we have to look at the counter arguments. So in certain regards, religion still plays a very prominent role. So for example, if you go to before COVID, go to an apostolic church or a Pentecostal church or a Church of God, for example, those more charismatic churches, you normally see a crowd of people being there. So that argument could be used to saying that no, even though some traditional churches or religious groups may be in decline, religion still holds more power than ever. Underscoring this though is also looking at the impact of how religion continues to influence laws and policy. So for example, it is believed that the reason why up to 70+% of Jamaicans don't necessarily believe or support abortion is partly because of the inherent values that may have the belief of children, and religion helps to reinforce these sorts of beliefs. So one could say that yes, we do see an increase in secularization. However, we still argue that religion still plays a very prominent role. It can be seen in the laws that are currently still being influenced by religious groups. It can be seen with even in COVID now, particularly in Jamaica, where you see where the government has taken an approach to try and engage with the church. in regards to COVID restrictions, because it's still a very powerful group, so we could still argue the for and against. Do we all understand? Are we all clear with how to answer this question? We're all clear, just type it in the chat, we're clear. Everyone ready? We're ready, we're still here, still in the church? Awesome, so we're all clear. So let's go on to the next question. All right, so this question was an interesting one because this particular topic does not come under the aspect of the syllabus that is being tested. Looking at the examination of Rastafarian culture and metropolitan societies is really a topic that it comes under a different section that looks at the global interactions with the Caribbean culture. However, this particular question was requested, and it's always good to prepare even for certain things that we may not expect. So let's get right into this question. All right, so this question is question 5 of the past paper 2010, which asks us to examine the impact of Rastafarian culture or religion on the metropolitan societies of North America and Europe. We're not going to spend much time on it because, like I said, it's not necessarily on the syllabus to be in the exam, but because it's requested and it does have elements of the Caribbean religion, that's why we're discussing it. Do we have, let's see, Anthony? Is Anthony here? You hearing me, Anthony? Oops. All right, Anthony doesn't seem like he's here. All right, well.
Yeah, I volunteer, sir.
Yes, Trudian. Could you read the subject report for us? There's
Sure.
the 2 lines you see here.
All right, the stronger candidates gain marks by addressing both the negative and positive aspects of the impact and by in-depth and insightful comments on this interesting topic. Weaker responses just spoke to the cultural practice of Rastafari as seen in the Caribbean and did not discuss the impact on the metropole.
Awesome, good.
Okay, continue.
Oh yes, continue.
Okay, the negative influences included some persecution of Rastafarians and the influence of the movements. I can't see because of a chat. Sorry about that, sir. The chat has uploaded and I can't see the rest of it.
Okay.
Movement members on the usage of cannabis. Not sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trudian. So this question particularly asks us to examine the role of Rastafarian culture and the metropolitan societies of North America and Europe. But it could easily be construed into examining the impact of the Rastafarian religion on Caribbean societies. So that's why I decided to discuss this question, because it could easily be reworked into another topic. The subject report asks us to look at what we oftentimes found is the students highlighted the positive aspects of the Rastafarian culture within the metropolitan countries. However, the stronger candidates, because we don't want to be good, we want to be great, but the stronger candidates gave the both arguments for and against, and they asked for looking at the in-depth response, while we also have to establish the link. So it's not just sufficient to provide the impact of Rastafarian culture and leave it there. You have to look at it as on a whole. So the impact of it on society itself, whichever society, whether it's going to be the metropolitan societies or the Caribbean societies. And then we get the balanced response. And so we can maximize responses by getting the arguments for and against. So let's get into our ideal responses. All right, so as earlier, we're going to look at some recommended points as to how we can go about answering these questions. So we can show how Rastafarian culture is practiced in both Caribbean and non-Caribbean migrants within metropolitan countries. Equally so, you can see how Rastafarian culture is practiced by both persons who are of that faith, or you can see how certain religious beliefs have transferred even within the Caribbean, if the question was going to ask you about Caribbean societies. So you can highlight how it provides for a spiritual and religious connection for migrants from the Caribbean who may live in metropolitan societies. So we see the linkage here. So it's not just providing religious and spiritual connection, but the link is important. We can also look at how the colors of the Rastafarian movement or Rastafarian culture has been used in clothing, material culture there. Whether it be t-shirts or winter scarves or other clothes within these metropolitan countries. Furthermore, we also see how the dreadlock hairstyle, which is a symbol of Rastafarian culture, has been adopted by those, especially those who are not from African descent, who live in these countries, as well as a person who may not be practicing Rastas, but they may like the style. So we see how the expansion of this religion or this culture has influenced different aspects of society. Moving on, we see how their diction that is used, whether it be calling the police Babylon or using terms such as I and I, have been seen as a form of culture. We also see where the term Babylon is seen as a form of resistance. This can be seen here locally, where people maybe deride police for supporting the Babylon system, but it could also be seen internationally, where you had the Brixton riots in the 1970s. So another examination of how the cultural considerations influence the society. We also can look at how it is this form of culture. It's easy to access ancestral ties. Sorry, how it became a way to access ancestral ties through the Back to Africa movement. So as you know, a major belief of Rastafarians is that they support repatriation to Africa. And therefore, supporting these views also identifies how you are sympathetic to this culture that supports Back to Africa. You can also look at the impact of music whenever dealing with culture, especially with religion. Music is a major element that transcends different religions. So with culture, you can look at, for example, reggae music, but also specific instruments like incorporation of drums. That is something that has its origins from reggae music. You can look at, if you were asked to look at other sorts of, or the contributions of religious groups to culture on a whole, you could look at how the incorporation of hymns, for example, into whether it be songs or such, that's also another area as well. So you can never go wrong with identifying music and how it has become mainstream. However, conversely, as a counterpoint, you could look at how this culture has also negatively affected society. So it's not my words though, but it's a potential argument that could be raised, is that the increasing use of cannabis within some societies that has been normalized because of the Rastafarian culture could be seen as a negative, because in some regards it is still considered taboo, or it is still considered as a sort of drug. So you can look at that aspect. However, on the brighter side, you can look at the mainstreaming of ITAL foods, language that are used, as well as other practices. All right, so that basically rounds out that question. Any questions or concerns or comments? Are we all clear? All right, I will take that as we are all clear. All right, great. So we all know what we're doing and how, even though this question looks at the linkage of this culture on metropole societies, we can always turn this question and examine how this particular culture is related to Caribbean societies. Just remember, if you are in doubt, always look at the aspect of people's life. So you look at what governs their lives, whether it be formal religious institutions or a day of worship. You look at the values is very important because values inform behavior. You can look at other elements of culture. Look, for example, music. Religion has a very important part to play in that area. You could look at family, for instance, because we see where religion supports certain family values. So when in doubt, just think of what particular elements of your life are influenced by external factors and look at the role that religion plays in that particular question. So since we have covered these particular areas, we can now look at another topic, which is, well, we went through the recap, which is the contribution of sports to Caribbean development. Now, since we're on this topic, can anyone volunteer and tell me, how do you think sports contributes to the region's development? All right, I see, let's see who I've not heard from in a while. All right, yes, Kimberly.
So I'm just going to give two so that other person can have a chance. So sports has contributed to the education of Caribbean persons by different schools can offer different scholarships for them to further their education. Secondly, it has made many jobs for persons. For example, the referees, the coaches, the athletes, recognition for the Caribbean, yes.
All right, great point. So we see where it contributes to education, jobs, recognition. Tania.
Okay, so sports, it builds the identity of the region. Like, for example, with Usain Bolt, like a lot of persons learn more about the Caribbean through him and other athletes. So it builds the identity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're all very right. Whoops, I see one more hand. Yes, Shaniel.
It increases economic, where tourists travel to Jamaica or to Caribbean countries to see popular athletes in sports.
Brilliant point. Yes, yes, you're so right. Sports tourism, as Gabriel would have just highlighted. All right areas, all areas that are clearly that you understand and you are very aware and cognizant of the whole role of sports. So in this particular topic had a number of questions, but sometimes what you find is that the questions that are asked are repeated a lot by CXC. So for instance, a question relating to sports came on the 2003, the 2006, 2007, 10, 11, and 13 and 17 past papers. So you clearly have different examples that you can use to practice this particular question. The questions tend to either relate to the contributions of sports to development, whether it be human, economic, or specific development, or looking at the challenges that are faced by Caribbean governments in using sports as a means of facilitating development within the region. The questions usually generally oscillate around those two points. which is consistent with the syllabus. So our next question, we're going to be looking at past paper 2013 question 2, which asks us to discuss the extent to which sports have contributed to the development of Caribbean identity, mark that word, regionally and in the diaspora, 30 marks. So let's get into it. So you see, you realize it's asking us for two things. What you may find is that sometimes persons may look only within the region and not look at the diaspora or the people who may live outside of the region. All right, so make sure whenever you read the instructions clearly, because sometimes it asks you for the two perspectives, those within the region and those outside of the region. So how would you answer this question? Firstly, we're going to have to look at sports, defining sport and particular sports that the Caribbean excels in. From establishing specific examples, we move to outline whether you strongly agree, whether you agree, whether you disagree, or whether you strongly disagree. So, for example, when discussing this question, the extent to which sports have contributed, you could say that it is to a limited extent that Caribbean identity and both regional and in the diaspora are shaped by sport, because there are other factors and you name them A, B, C, and D. Or you could say it is to a significant degree that Caribbean identity, regional identity, and identity within the diaspora is shaped by sports, and you state it A, B, C, or D. So you state your position, to what extent you support the notion or the prompt, and then from there, you look at reasons for your position and explore these points in your essay. Once again, remember, those 30-mark questions require you to give the two sides of the perspective. You take a position, you acknowledge the counterpoint or the counter argument that is to be made from the position, and then you weigh them and you show why one side is more or better substantiated than the other. So give arguments for and against for whatever position that you take. All right, so let's look at some specific examples. From this end, we're looking at how, or we're taking the viewpoint that sports has contributed to Caribbean development. As to the degree of how it contributes to identity, both regional and in the diaspora, that's for you to determine. It's important you have the points so you can use the points accordingly. So one, we look at how sports has been essential in establishing the Caribbean's regional identity. Straightforward. You can go back as far as this example is as far back as a cricket team, which were champions in the 1970s, but you can actually go even further back to when Jamaica first competed, well, along with the other Caribbean countries on that Caribbean team in, I believe it was the 1950s, and we did extremely well. So from as far back as then, we're seeing how where sports has heavily influenced Caribbean identity. From as far back as even before independence. But that is a very strong, a very potent argument that you can use for how sports influences the shaping of the regional identity. Because you can look at regional institutions. You see, don't look at your syllabus in a silo. You can pull from other areas. So for example, the West Indies Cricket Board is an example of a regional institution that has lasted the test of time. Some can argue that it has promoted Caribbean regional identity in cricket. You can look at, and this particular example is from a different topic that we previously discussed, the whole issue of regional institutions, and the West Indies Cricket Board is a part of it. So you can look back at that area and see how it influences here. Moreover, you can also look at the whole question of good point, Brittany, the whole question of bobsleighing, how Jamaica and the Caribbean punches above its weight in different sports. So in athletics, we see there are countries that are significantly smaller than other larger territories that are still able to do extremely well. As a matter of fact, there's a book that if you have the time, I encourage you to read it. It is called Orlando Patterson, the Confounding Ireland, and it has a chapter that it specifically looks at Jamaica, but the chapter is also applicable to other persons within the Caribbean. But it looks at why Jamaicans run so fast, and it examines the different investments that have been made that has ensured that Jamaica, as well as other Caribbean countries, have a culture of sports and athletics that ensures that we punch far above our weight. So we see how where national pride is formed from persons who do well in sports. So you will always see, for example, Jamaicans coming out with data finals for any team that may be. You may not be following it up, but when it's the finals, everyone's out and in support of the team. So we see you see how national identity is formed. You can also look at how sports, because remember, it not only asks for Caribbean identity regionally, but also in the diaspora. And you can also look at how sports and members in the diaspora encourages a sense of connection to citizens back home. I remember specifically in the 2012 Olympics in London. I was 12 at the time. I think I was 12 at the time. But I remember specifically that you would see Jamaicans as far and wide coming together in support of the Olympic team that was there in London. And you saw it again in 2008. And you've been seeing it as far back where Jamaicans across the world are able to support the country and diaspora are able to support by creating this sense of connection through doing well in sports. We also see how our athletes, when they do well internationally, serve as very important role models for students here. So we oftentimes use Usain Bolt, but other athletes will do. So Usain Bolt came from Trelawney, a rural parish that is not a parish that you particularly think of when you are looking at parishes to name in Jamaica. But we see how this rural young man who, due to hard work, determination, and talent, was able to take on the world. It's a very potent story, very good role model. So just the fact of having athletes with role models that can shape Caribbean identity, you see a case of resilience, determination, grit. All of these points could be their own paragraphs. You just have to expound on it because it asks you to discuss. All right, let's see if we have another one in here. Gabrielle, are you still here with us? Oops, before we go into that, Shaniel, you have your hand up? All right, that may be an error. Gabriel, are you with us?
Hello?
Hi, Gabriel.
Background.
Oh, your background's noisy.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. Understood. Let's see here. What about Jamila? Is Jamila here? Are you here? Are you hearing us? Oops, not hearing Jamila. Let's see if we have any other volunteers who'll be willing to read for us today. Wendy? Oops, I heard somebody. Yes, Jamila, you're here.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Jamila. Could you read for us the two paragraphs here from the subject report or the examiner's report?
Okay, no problem. Subject report. Even in those cases where candidates are able to list a number of sportsmen and sports, they were unable to develop an analysis of what is development in the Caribbean and in the diaspora in North America, Britain, and Europe. Stronger candidates demonstrated their full grasp of the question by analyzing the Carifta Games, the investment of regional governments in cricket stadiums, and the triumphs of athletes such as Karani James and Shelley-Ann Fraser and the Olympic Games.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Could you share with us, if you don't mind, which Caribbean country are you from?
Trinidad and Tobago.
Awesome. It's good to have a Caribbean perspective. And could you just share, if you know, some athletes and the sports that they do from Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, those that I know is George Bovell. He swims, and Kishon Walcott. He does javelin.
Awesome. Could you just repeat that again? Because it's very important that the persons who are here have the Caribbean examples, because that's how you can really show really strong students. Could you just repeat it one more time, please?
George Bovell, he's a national swimmer. Kishon Walcott, he does javelin. And Atto Bolan, he used to do track and field.
Awesome. Also, kindly asking that you can make a note of it here in the chat, so they will all have benefit of it, so they can look at those examples. All right, so just write that in the chat for me, please, Jamila, because we don't only want to look at a Jamaican perspective. It's a regional exam. Regional examples are useful, and we're very happy to have someone from outside of Jamaica to provide their perspective from their territory. So what we see here from the subject report, we see where even in those cases where candidates were able to list the number of sportsmen and sports, they were unable to develop an analysis of what is development in the Caribbean and in the diaspora in North America, Britain, and Europe. So this is a linking problem. The issue that were noted by examiners is the link. So it's not only sufficient to identify the sportsmen, but look at how it's developing, because the module is issues in Caribbean development. Important note, show the link between development. All right, so let's go into that. So stronger candidates demonstrated their full grasp of the question by analyzing the CARIFLA games, investment in regional government in cricket stadia, which basically means the plural of stadium, like how you have bacteria is the plural of bacterium. Stadia is the plural for stadium. So that's simply what it means. So let's get right into it. Let's look at what the stronger candidates are doing, because we don't want to be just good, we want to be great. We're looking at how through this contribution to Caribbean how sports can contribute to Caribbean identity. This can also take place through how sports encourages the formation of certain Caribbean institutions. So for example, most Caribbean countries have a minister of sport. In Jamaica, that is Minister Babsy Grange, is Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sports. So most ministries have a Ministry of Sport. We also look at how stronger candidates were also able to show how the persons with these athletes were able to connect with members within the diaspora. So visiting different persons within the diaspora. You can look at how we see through sports, you're granting scholarships for promising young persons to study overseas. That also contributes to the identity of Caribbean people. If you go to champs, or you have been to champs before COVID, you would oftentimes see at the finish line after the ISA Boys and Girls School Championships, there are a group of men that are usually nearby the, the finish line after the races are won. Not all of them are officials. Sometimes those persons that you see very close to the finish line are recruiters, or looking at how to attract talented athletes overseas as well. So we see how that helps to form Caribbean identity. And we also see that sport allows Caribbean persons to pursue health and fitness at all ages and stages of life. All right, before I get into that, so are we all clear on this particular paper? And thank you for sharing, Jamila. And if there are any other Caribbean nationals who are here, I'm kindly asking you to indicate your country that you're from, as well as some sporting personalities from your country, so we can all appreciate your perspective. Do we have any questions Any comments? Any concerns? All right, we're all clear. We're crystal. All right, looks like we're all clear. All right, so let's get into the next question. So the next question is the Caribbean Studies past paper. This is from 2011, and we're looking at question 4, which is discuss 4 challenges that are faced by Caribbean governments in using sports as a means of facilitating development in the region. The subject report says that some candidates did not define the concepts of sport or development. Others did not focus on the issue of challenges. Some candidates identified the challenges faced by Caribbean governments, but failed to argue the rationale for the challenges. We see the importance of the link. I cannot stress enough how important it is, not only to look at the first part of the question and say, yes, this is easy. 5 challenges faced by Caribbean governments in sports. And then you just list the challenges and you discuss it. You have to look at how it relates to the development of the region. So let's get right into it. How do you answer this question? Well, the subject report is actually quite instructive in this regard. It says teachers and candidates are advised to pay close attention to the issues of development within this model and to critically examine the debates that arise. So development, examine sports and development. You can look at now your introduction. As stated previously, can't hammer it home enough, definition, definition, definition. Define your key terms. Before you start your essay, take a question, take your pencil if you have, or take a pen, outline the key terms. Look at how many challenges it requires. Look at, it says challenges faced by who? The government. So challenges underlined, government underlined, using sport as a means of facilitating development underlined. All right, so we define sport and development. And then we look at how they're linked. So you establish the link between sport development and how it can impact the economy. Then from there, we outline the challenges faced by Caribbean countries in regards to sports and development. So ensure you make the link in the essay's body. I'm going to provide the opportunity now to hear from some of our sports personalities. Does anyone here plays a sport or played a sport? Or are we all unfit people? Let's see, anyone here plays a sport? You can just raise your hand. We want to hear your perspective. No one did sports in high school? We don't have any sports person here? Yes, yes, Kimberly, it looks like we're all unfit in this workshop. No hands, no one played any sports in high school or in the community. Has anyone played football or scrimmage? No, all right, well.
I was, good afternoon. I played netball for 3 years at high school, and I also played for my community.
Awesome. Thank you, Shade, for showing us all up for not doing sports. Shade, before you go, could you explain, when you were on the netball team, what were some of the challenges you faced in terms of doing the sport at the school level?
Okay, so some challenges I faced was the school did not have all the resources that was needed for the training to be effective. Some students didn't have the correct gear. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, so you see mainly resources, and resources is of fundamental importance. Thank you, Shade. So let's get into it. So important issues that affect sports and development. As Shade would have just outlined, sports, lack of funds to promote sports development. This takes place at the national level and also it takes place at the local level because the different levels of government, because government is not only the large agency, but government also provides resources to schools also provide resources to community groups. And what you oftentimes find is that there is an inability to encourage sports and pushing sports to facilitate development due to a lack of resources. This is, and I know we're going to expound more on that. This is due to budget constraints that may occur within the government. This may also be looking at the whole case of limited resources that have to be directed to other areas because they're competing interests in a budget. So we're looking at lack of sports to promote development. There was an article the other day that was published after the ISA Secondary School Sporting Association event, because this year Champs Magothy came, I believe, 10th. It may have been, yeah, I believe Magothy High School came 10th. Magothy High School is a rural institution and it did extremely well and it punched far above its weight than usual in these events. But the challenge, it actually came on the radio, but the challenge was that, see, your school is doing very well, Shadi. The challenge was that, and they had interviewed the principal, was that they were unable to, they did not have a track, and they have not had a track for many, many years. And that was that concern that that lack of infrastructure will not necessarily encourage the further growth of athletes. Not necessarily the case, but resources is a major feature, a major aspect to looking at sports. Because remember, the good student just gives the information, but the great student provides examples. You can provide examples from your own respective high schools and institutions, because I'm sure that even if sports are supported, some sports are more supported than others, and we're going to get right into that. So the second element is we're looking at a heavy emphasis in schools on academic pursuits at the expense of sports. Another important issue, there are some schools in Jamaica, for example, particularly all-girls schools, some all-girls schools, whose students don't participate in events such as any national sporting events such as Champs, which is the largest secondary sporting event in this side of the world. And why there's oftentimes this continuous focus on academics, which oftentimes come at the expense of school involvement in sports. So some schools don't even register to participate or don't even have an athletics team. So that's another example that can underscore your point. Then you're going to look at another element of, all right, we see a point here that was raised. Let me go and take a look at it. All right, so are statistics considered as examples? I had a bunch in my essay. Statistics is one particular, it depends on how you use a statistic, because your statistic has to prove a point. So if you are looking at, let's see here, off the top of my head, there are, sorry about that. All right, let's see now. If we are just gonna ask if you could ignore him. He gets very, very passionate when you see some people. All right, let's use your example. Let's use your example of 40% of athletes go abroad to study. Yes, that would be an example. That would be an example depending on how you use it. If you're going to use the opportunity where sports can provide educational development for young persons, for youth, and you say, for example, 40% of athletes go overseas to study or pursue further education, then the example or that statistic you have provided does suit the requirement of being an example that you can use in your essay. Whenever you use the statistics to ensure you know the source that you use it from. So for example, when I had mentioned the statistics with the number of fisher folk that were available, that was quoted from a textbook. All right, so yes, it would use an example depending on how you use the statistic, but also, no, you don't have to say which particular athlete that went. You could, but it's not a requirement. Just look at it and how it proves the point. It has to prove the point. So don't just use a statistic, use it. If you're going to look at it again, where sports provides opportunities, for example, 40%, according to this study, 40% of athletes who participated in this particular field went overseas afterwards, then that proves the point. All right. So now getting back into it, we're looking at the perception of sports merely as leisure time activity, which does not require much effort or focus. So we look at the issue with priorities as well. This is also a priority issue when looking at sports. And now you're looking at the absence of university training programs to develop sport management specialists. I don't know if this is as much of an issue locally as it may have been for other smaller territories, because I know that, for example, in Jamaica, we do have institutions like GC Foster and such that deals with providing training programs. But then again, you could always look at the take-up rate of these training programs. Are persons taking up these programs? Are persons going and pursuing these fields to look at? So that's also another dimension to look at it. So these are challenges. So we've gone through 4 challenges already. Let's go through some more. All right, we're also looking at lack of support for some uncommon sports or also sports pursued by females. This is a constant issue. So you would see, for example, more resources going to track and field than those who would go to fencing or to, let's see, to chess is another example, because those are sports that are not particularly common. In terms of female sports, I think that goes without saying. You would always see a crowd supporting the reggae boys rather than seeing a crowd coming out to the reggae girls, even though one team actually has been doing much better than the other. We won't get into that, but that's also another issue. Also, we see a comment in the chat saying, with a challenge before instance, if the government are giving money or paying them to teach the coaches' salaries, but the teams are not bringing home any wins or much money. I wouldn't put that as a challenge faced by the government. I wouldn't necessarily use it as a challenge faced by the government, because it's more what you're raising more looks at the whole issue with the team involvement and such. What we're looking at is now the government as a stakeholder by itself. So is government, look at, let's use the 5 W's when examining this issue. Who does the government invest in? So who are the sport that is invested? Why is this resource invested? What does it go towards? How is it spent? And when is it spent? So under who it goes towards, when looking at a challenge, if government's going to spend $1, more than likely, most of that dollar is going towards track and field, maybe football, maybe cricket, but definitely track and field. You can say that without any person questioning it. What it goes towards is more looking at big investments, for example. So when Cricket World Cup was here, we made investments in Jamaica with different stadia across the country. When looking at when it happens, it usually happens with big events. Sometimes you don't see investments in smaller events, or the investment may be promised, but it may not come in time. I've seen that happen, I believe, with the national netball team in Jamaica. So you can look at that. So who, what, when, where, why. All right. You can just remember that, and then you can easily break down the challenges faced by the government in facilitating development. So even though female sports is one such avenue that can promote development, it's not necessarily focused on because of where the resources are going to. You're also looking at competing demand from sectors on the national budget. And we also see where the lack of different sports stadia for training and international competitions. All right, so basically straightforward. All right, overall, we're going to look through this a summary. of the contributions made to sports from the Caribbean's development. So we're looking at development of the economy. That goes without saying. We can take a stakeholders analysis of it. Looking at different stakeholders, very, very useful when trying to find points that you may not immediately remember. So let's look at the development of the economy. You can see the promotion of sports tourism. You can see where, let's link it, development of the economy and income for different stakeholders. You can look at sports tourism. That benefits local persons, provides additional employment. When a stadium is constructed, you're talking more employment, more infrastructure that is also provided. When you're looking at income for trainers, you're looking at those who are who do physiotherapists. You're looking at nutritionists. You're looking at doctors, sports doctors. You are looking at managers. So we see where you're developing the economy and providing income from different groups and different stakeholders whenever there is a sporting activity. That's one area where you see the Caribbean provides, the contribution of sports to Caribbean development. You're also looking at the employment opportunities that are provided. So for every sporting event, you're going to need support staff that are there. Even when you may not even think about it, but even when you have an event and there are persons who need to clean up after the event, that's additional employment opportunities. There's a multiplier effect of opportunities when looking at the contribution of sports to Caribbean development. So when looking at the National Stadium in Jamaica is a stadium that really it earns the most money when it's the champs because of how large the event is. You're also going to see another benefit looking at the development of talent locally. So we see where we have a lot of talented persons, sports can bring out that talent. And it does this by encouraging discipline by investing in young persons. We also see where it can promote government investment in certain areas. Government, not only government investment, but private sector investment to develop certain schools. So for instance, you would have seen that there are a number of traditional high schools within Kingston that would have received investments in developing a field at their school. So for example, Jamaica College is one such institution, Calabar High School. Examples, private companies investing in these schools to increase the overall, to enhance the overall sporting programs that may exist. So this also contributes to development because that's one less field that the government can think of investing in. All right, that's another area. We also see how it goes without saying it promotes health and fitness, another very important area. Because health and fitness is very well. So most persons do PE programs in school. So the examples in your schools are not inherently different. You can look at your school, look at what it does well, look at what it doesn't well, and see how it works with sports. All right, so that's awesome. And we're also looking at how it encourages emerging industries. So as mentioned before, sports tourism is one. You can look at others. It contributes to the Caribbean's overall identity. And it also looks at providing educational opportunities that may not normally be present. An important thing to note is that there was one question that had specifically asked for a spot. It made mention of a sport. That was a 2007 paper that looked at cricket. However, during that time, Cricket World Cup was in the Caribbean, so that may have been the reason why this particular question was asked. However, there's no reason why this question cannot be asked again. So I'm imploring and encouraging everyone to look in depth of at least 2 sporting activities in the Caribbean, at least 2. So since we know that sport is coming on the exam, and that is guaranteed since they have shared what is coming on the exam, then it's important we can get some bonus marks from not only just saying sports vaguely, but looking at 2 specific sports. Just read up about the sports, identify persons you may want to mention. You could do even a list. John Brown does this, did well at this, Mary Jane does this, and but do at least 2 sporting activities, look at them in depth. Cricket is always one that's encouraged because cricket is a national sport and it makes specific reference to cricket, so it can come again. Track and field also works as well. We may also want to look at a sport that may not be as common, whether it be chess or badminton or any of those areas, but at least 2 sports, so you can definitely have all your bases covered going into the exam. We here at the recap, we actually finished much earlier than I had intended, but alas, it's not a problem because it would just mean that you have more time to go and revise, to remember to go through what we did. You can always look back at the YouTube videos, or you could take the time to break, rest, and go back and do what you're doing. So let's go through the recap. So we discussed the impact of societal institutions on Caribbean people. Could anyone outline 3 impacts, three impacts of religion, any religion, on the lifestyle of Caribbean people? Any hands, any takers? We're giving away I'm giving away the final credit for today. Yes, Tania.
So first, religion has impacted the laws that we have. Like, for example, in the Bible, where thou shalt not kill, killing is illegal. So it has impacted the laws that the government implements on its citizens. It has affected the culture, because like for example, Rastafarianism, they don't eat meat, they don't, the way they dress with the whole locks and everything as well. And with the way people like the way they eat like food, I guess. So
good, awesome. So those are some first 3 areas. We look at laws, we look at values, we look at also food. Awesome. All right, Tania, just ensure you just send me a message on WhatsApp. My number is in the group, so I can make a note of it. We also have Adriano.
Religion promotes social order and cohesion in society. Religion leads to a collective conscience, meaning that it has values that shape us as a people, and religion creates a sense of belonging, and it causes people to conform to societal norms and rules.
Awesome, very important. Thank you. And both you and Tania have earned yourself additional credit for today. All right, so we basically brilliantly summed up the whole aspect of religion. We can look at how religion informs norms, values, laws, how it looks at and influences culture, cuisine, how it affects clothing, and different aspects of culture. Then we went on to the whole issue of sports and looked at how sports can impact Caribbean's development. So it provides educational opportunities, it provides infrastructure, it provides a sense of cultural identity, it looks at how it can promote infrastructure within the country, as well as different other areas. We also looked at the challenges faced by sports, including the whole issue of limited resources, lack of focus on certain sports versus the other, insufficient infrastructure in place, insufficient personnel in place, and how sports can compete with other budget priorities. And that basically wraps up our session, or at least our content session. We're going to go straight into the whole issue of essay writing tips, which I'll just quickly go through, and then the floor will be open for your questions. The floor will be completely open to your questions, which I'll take, and then we'll just wrap up from there. So, essay writing tips. You would have heard me mention it throughout the presentation, but this really sums them up. 1, ensure you define your key terms. Provide your key terms and your examples within your introduction. Defining key terms, very good to get knowledge-based questions. 2, look at your thesis statement. This is essentially the end, the statement at the end of the introduction that shows what your essay is going to be about. Caribbean studies is a little different from other essays. It doesn't need a very long introduction. Just get right into the point. You get right into the point, you're well. You don't need to have a 10-sentence introduction or even a 7-sentence introduction. The questions don't just need something like that. A 4 to 5-sentence introduction can clearly outline what you need, and you go straight into it because it's 4 essays, 3 hours. Just remember that. 4 essays, 3 hours. So you don't necessarily have the luxury of long-winded essays. Just get right into it. So define the key terms, then provide a thesis statement. This isn't here, but I'll also put it on. Ensure you're going to the exam with a plan as to how much time you're spending on each essay. That's very important. Sometimes you may find persons may have exceptionally good, the first 2 essays are done exceptionally well, but they've run out of time and they are unable to finish the second or the last 2 essays. So pace yourself. That's important. 4 essays, 3 hours. All right, you can do the math. You can see some essays may require more time than others, especially if they're a 20-mark question. So you can look at how much time you need and move accordingly. It is about, I think, 106. Sorry, let's see, it's 180 minutes thereabout. So let's look at maybe 35 minutes per essay, which would give you sufficient time to go and check over, finish your points and such. Next thing, address each point in a paragraph. It's easy for the examiners to follow when you have each point in a paragraph. So if you're looking at the whole a 3-point essay looking at the challenges affecting CARICOM, we see economic challenges related to imbalances of trade, political will, and resource constraints. Don't jumble them in one, because that doesn't maximize your marks on knowledge. Clearly structure it and discuss each in a paragraph. Then provide real world examples. We live in the real world, we live in a practical world. Examiners love when you can provide real world examples. Some of the past papers actually ask you to look at and cite specific examples. Easy way to find examples, let's read the newspaper. The newspaper has a whole heap of different examples that can illustrate the point. You can always look at it online as well. It's quite accessible. So for example, we can look at a newspaper, just like a newspaper such as this, any random newspaper, and you could find a lot of different points to support your argument. So if we're looking at, let's see here, the 4 topics: education, CARICOM or integration. Okay, see, just from picking up one paper here, I have already found a potential article that can support your point when looking at religion. If they're increasing distrust for religion, calls for background checks for fly-by-night pastors. You see the distrust of religious institutions. If you're now seeing where persons are calling for background checks for pastors, then you can clearly see now where there may be distrust in the whole religious system in place. All right, so that's just one particular point, just from looking at one paper. I haven't actually even gone into this paper in depth, but like I said, just reading the paper, you can find a number of different examples. What I used to do, well, for some of my subjects, I used to actually get a scrapbook and I would identify important articles and I would cut them out and keep them in my scrapbook. So this one was looking at, I think, different current affair issues. So like hospitals in breach as such. So I would actually cut out the articles because of COVID and persons aren't actually buying physical papers. What I'd encourage is you go online and you bookmark them and you save your articles. So you have the examples, the real world examples are important. Then from there, you look at stating your position. So you must, if it asks you to say to what extent do you agree, state the extent. To an extreme extent, to a limited extent, state your position. But don't only provide your perspective, provide counter arguments. That's important. That's going to get you marks as well because you're able to discuss, you're able to provide different viewpoints. And number 6, we're looking at, remember to answer what the question asks. Sometimes we see a question and we say, oh, it looks easy, and we go right ahead without actually looking at what exactly is it asking me. An easy way to do that is after you are in your exam room, you look at the question, you highlight the key terms, you physically highlight them with a pen or a pencil. And then you have, usually I think they provide you with a box to make notes, and you make notes as to what you're going to do. All right. Then from there, if you find that you're running out of time, list your points. If you are desperately out of time, list your points. The examiners will consider it. Just list them going down. So if you're looking at contribution of sports development and you only have 5 points or 4 points, but you haven't been able to develop them, you know, 5 more points, you can just go and list them as quickly as you can. You get more time, you can go and develop them from there. And those are the essay tips that I will suggest for you. I am now open for any questions. Any questions whatsoever? Yes, Shaniel, I see your hand is raised.
I was looking at some past papers where they asked you to list 3 points on a specific topic, and it was a 20-mark question. So I'm wondering if we are supposed to just list the 3 points, or we can list more points.
Which what was the question? What did the question specifically ask?
I do not remember at the moment.
I can't comment on it unless I actually know what the question is asking, because it could be to examine 3 arguments or 3 points when discussing a specific topic. And depending on what is the operative word, whether it is discuss or analyze, examine, evaluate, that 3 could be not only 3, but you could do points for, points against. So I would need to know what exactly is the specific question. All right, I see Akishma saying, when using sources, would multiple sources be more beneficial than getting statistics from one source? Yes, multiple sources are always better. You'll find when you get to university, you can't use one source. So, and CAPE is supposed to prepare you for university. So using multiple sources is great. If you know them, and you can cite them, then use them. Any other questions? You can send your questions in the chat, or you can use the mic function or the raise hand function, and you can ask your question verbally. No questions? Are we all clear as to what are we required to do? How we go and revise going forward? All right, I'm going to say yes. Yes, I believe so. We are all clear. Oops. Clear.
Question.
Yes, question. I welcome question.
It's a past paper question, actually, that someone sent to me. It says, West Indian cricket, once the pride and joy of Caribbean sports fans worldwide, has in recent years often lacked competitiveness in matches. Assess the impact that this lack of competitiveness will have on regional cricket in general and on the region's development specifically.
That question came on 2007 in the highlight of the Cricket World Cup. Let me see here. What I will do, and thank you for raising the question, is I will attempt to find the examiner's report, and then we can all go and look at that question. So give me 1 minute so I can find the examiner's report. Then we move from there. So West Indies.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, so we have the question here. All right, let's see here. Sorry, just give me 1 minute. Let me find the specific question. All right, so that was question 8 or question. Wait, sorry, wrong thing. Question 7 of 2007. And the examiner says candidates in this question were required to assess the impact of the lack of competitiveness will have on regional cricket in general and the region's development specifically. The question was very popular among candidates. Most candidates understood the question and displayed their competence with fully rounded discussions on the lack of competitiveness of regional cricket and on the impact of the development of the region. Overall, those candidates performed well and had relevant points which they articulated in well-developed essays. Candidates also displayed a good knowledge of the game by offering statistics and their recommendations on what ought to be done about West Indies cricket. Some even stated that this lack of competitiveness should force a number of improvements in West Indian cricket. Candidates who performed below the passing grade were in the minority. Most of these misrepresented the question and focused on a number of issues, but did not answer the question directly. For example, those candidates chose to focus on individual performance, great cricket personalities, the great cricketing stars of yesteryears, and how they felt about the state of the game. However, these arguments were not linked to issues raised in the question. Again, we stress that candidates need to read the question carefully to ensure that they provide responses stipulated by the question. That's what the examiner's report says. All right, so let's now break down how we answer this question. Let me see if I can share my screen so you can see what I was now looking at. All right. Are you now seeing it?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So we're looking at how the lack of competitiveness will have on regional cricket in general and the region's development. Just off the bat, is anyone, or let's see now. Does anyone currently in the chat, you can use your hand, watch cricket? Does anyone watch cricket any at all? Anisha, great. Anisha, could you share with us how you feel about cricket?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Well, how I feel about cricket, it's an exciting match to watch, especially when the Caribbean team is playing the West Indies, when they're playing against the different islands such as New Zealand, and so it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Anicio? Oops, not hearing her. Anicia? All right, we're not hearing Anicia now. All right, let's see. All right, Kimberly says she used to watch it when she was younger. Kimberly?
Yes.
Oh, okay, understand, Anicia. Kimberly, could you explain your experience watching cricket when you were younger?
Exciting. Family members also gathered and watched the game, but no,
Mm-hmm.
I think that I had lost interest.
And why would you have lost interest? Huh?
I'm honestly not sure because persons, when I was younger, persons used to talk about it a lot. It was always on TV and so on. But now everybody is watching football. Everybody is talking about the different football teams and so on. So
I'm suggesting that a reason why it may not be seen as exciting is the lack of competitiveness in the sport. And now, since we have started to explore this whole issue, we can look at how the lack of competitiveness simply means that normally they used to be performing well, extremely well, and now they're no longer doing it. But no, let's link that now to the contribution of sport to Caribbean development, because the question may look daunting on the surface because many persons may not necessarily know about cricket. While it's important to read about cricket, this is a question you can figure out. Lack of competitiveness, teams are not doing well. So if your team is not doing well, is your team necessarily going to be able to channel investment into the particular sport? And this is an open question. I'm asking, if your team is not doing well, how do you encourage investment in the sport? Let's see the chat here. Exactly. No, you're not able to channel investment. Let's see now, what's the impact of not being able to channel investments? We know a large income of sporting personalities due to getting contracts and such with persons who do well. So your team is not competitive, not doing well. So less persons are willing to invest in your team and to sign contracts. Money, exactly, Dijonay. Money is going to be invested somewhere else. So what you're going to see? Fall in incomes of the players themselves, as well as fall in incomes and opportunities for aspiring persons who may be interested. Because this not only affects the players, but if everyone is seeing that, okay, for argument's sake, football is doing much better, they're gonna go and push football, and they're gonna go and join football more. And what you may see, less people doing cricket. You see the multiplier effect. So lack of competitiveness. Follow me now. Let's look at the link. Lack of competitiveness. That's the issue. As a result of lack of competitiveness, unable to attract investment. Now, from being unable to attract investment, you see fall in income, income for the players, reduction in opportunities. I see Lachelle has her hand up.
So I was saying when you spoke about it not getting as much attention, like for instance, football or track and field. When I was coming to high school, I thought that sports was, had a lot of it was versatile. So I wasn't expecting to see mostly track and field and football. I was expecting to see more. But like in high school, it's mostly track and field, football, swimming, and I just seen rugby coming in the picture, but I hardly see cricket. And so not many students, especially because you have students who want to do cricket, but the school doesn't provide it. So
yes,
it crumbles from there.
And that's a very, very relevant point, because what you may sometimes see is since we're looking at limited resources here. So you already have limited resources, but then you see some fields are doing better than other fields. So a school, a reasonable individual is going to really channel their money to where they can actually connect it, to where they can actually visibly see the benefits. If cricket is not competitive, then people are going to say, why should I invest in it? And why should I spend my money there when I can invest it somewhere else? So what you see now, less investment in cricket. So from a height of investing in Cricket World Cup from the 2007, if you look at it, you probably will see less investment in cricket. What you see now, you're unable to attract players as well. Opportunities that normally would have been available to cricket is no longer there again because persons are not looking at how to invest in cricket because they're not seeing it as competitive. What you also see as well, that closes doors for scholarships for persons who may do cricket because you may not necessarily see the benefit of it. As a result, less talent going into cricket. With less talent going into cricket, less people doing it, government says, wait, no, I can invest in football because more people are benefiting from football. So where you see, government rechannels its investment elsewhere. All right. And as a result, you see where it's a constant cycle. So government channels its investment elsewhere, less investment goes to cricket. You have less, cricket is not able to do as well as it used to do with less investment. So performance may not necessarily improve. And it feeds the cycle as well. Private sector goes somewhere else. Cricket no longer is competitive. Cricket doesn't remain as competitive because there's no investment in cricket. Reduction in opportunities, reduction in income, the cricketing economy is unable to develop to its fullest extent. And now, most importantly, you see the contribution to the Caribbean identity, because the Caribbean used to pride itself as a country that could tackle on the United Kingdom. So you would find that cricket used to be the country where Caribbean nationals would show their superiority to their former colonial power, the United Kingdom. With CARICOM no longer able to be as competitive, you see where now the whole regional culture, regional identity that was linked to cricket is no longer there. Sorry about that. Sorry, just give me 1 minute when we can settle down. All right, so yes, what you see. So you're going to see less investment. Just kind of kindly ask if you could just ignore the dog. So you're going to see less investment in those particular areas, and it constantly feeds the cycle. Let me look at the chat here. See, at one point, people used to know the names of most of the players on the cricket team, but now they can't think of even one, which also feeds the cycle. Less media contracts, less people watching it. Media's not going to pay as much attention. Younger persons coming up, not able to learn more about the history of cricket. And as a result, you see the popularity goes to other sports. So I hope I answered your question. See, have I answered your question? I'm trying to remember who it was who had asked the question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Are we all clear as to how we can tackle the issue, how we can break it down?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. So we have tackled that issue. Do we have any other questions? Any other points or any other things we may want to discuss? Let's see here. All right, Shanil says she has found the question with 3 ways. All right, I believe it's 3 ways to respond. All right. All right, so we see we need further clarity with the syncretic religions. A syncretic religion is simply a religion that developed here within the Caribbean. So most religions developed outside of the Caribbean. So Christianity developed elsewhere, Islam developed in the Middle East, Buddhism, India. Most religions developed elsewhere. Syncretic religions are ones that developed here locally. And they are a combination of, okay, in relation to slavery and colonization, perfect. They're a combination of different influences. So what you may find is that syncretic religion combines the values of, wait, a syncretic religion may, sorry, give me 1 minute, let me. All right, so a syncretic religion would combine the customs of the main religion as well as incorporate other religions. So you would find like in Pocomania, the bedrock of it is Christianity. They do have Christian values. But on the other hand, they also look at combining African beliefs as well. So you see the syncretic religion is basically a hybrid or an example of creolization, to use up an important sociological term, or a fusion of different religious beliefs. And that basically is a syncretic religion. Does that answer your question, Rachel? All right, perfect. I see another hand is raised. Yes, Shanil.
Yes, back to my question that I was asking you.
Yes.
Like, I found a question. It's a 30-mark question, and it says, examine 3 ways in which religion as a social institution has had an impact on society and culture in the Caribbean. So I am wondering if it's a 30-mark question, you will normally have 6 to 7 points. So if they ask you to examine 3 ways, so I'm wondering how you would put that in the points.
All right, can you repeat the question?
Examine 3 ways in which religion as a social institution has had an impact on society and culture in the Caribbean.
All right, good. So in this regard, you only use 3 points, but you discuss and you extensively discuss the 3 points. So you could look at, let's say, the law and how religion forms a bedrock of certain laws and policies, and laws, policies, legal framework. That's one point, and you discuss it in depth. You could look at abortion, you could look at other topics, you could look at antiquated laws, lack of updating of certain laws because it may violate certain religious beliefs. That's one end. You could look at how religion forms a belief system for people, which is enforced in the educational system. So you see where several prominent schools within the Caribbean are started by church schools, which also enforce certain religious doctrines as well. And we see where the religious viewpoints of people are shaped by the values that they have, which are reinforced through educational institutions founded through the religious groups. You could also look at culture and look at how the religion influences culture, because religion and culture plays a very important role. So a lot of our main cultural groups are influenced by certain religious groups. So Rastafarianism is an example of a religion that's also a part of our culture. You look at the incorporation of certain beats and the incorporation of certain drums and such, you get that from syncretic religions. So the whole issue, like I will use the example, Pocomania, voodoo, certain beats and drums that are notes that you normally associate with certain religious instruments have now come over into music, into dance, into performance. So there are just 3 areas. You look at legal systems, look at value systems, look at cultural norms. But you can, what I would suggest in this context to maximize the marks, you have these 3 areas that you can broadly state, but then in your discussion, you provide the analysis of the different perspectives of it. So if you're looking at value systems, you can look at the church with value systems, education with value systems, and look at how these 2 stakeholders both achieve the issue of religion, or not issue, but the point of religion enforcing values. So that is how I would say you can tackle the question. Does that answer your question, Chanel?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, great. Do we have any other questions? All right, I see Adriana has some in the chat. Are there any law and history sessions or group? Well, no, we're not doing any law sessions or history sessions this year. I believe we may have some papers that you could get access to, but I would encourage you to speak to our coordinator, Rowan, who is also in the WhatsApp group, for further follow-up in that regard. Same response, Torian. We don't necessarily have any a session relating to those subjects just this year, but definitely encourage you to shoot Ron a message. We may be able to see if we can get some papers as well. Without further ado, I think we have answered all the questions. We have tackled all the points that were raised, different past papers. We have done an extremely good job. We have covered at least 3, 6, 9, about 10, at least 10 past papers, and they cover different areas of the topics that CXC has announced that will be coming. And I am very happy that we enjoyed the session. In terms of how you may join the WhatsApp group, let me see. Rowan, are you able to send a link? Is Rowan still here with us?
Yes, I'm here. You said you wanted the WhatsApp link?
Yes, so send the WhatsApp group link in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna do it now.
All right, let me go and officially close the. Thank you all for being here. That's the end of our Caribbean Studies session. We're gonna just quickly just do the housekeeping matters after we just do the wrap up. But I'm very happy to be here. The group will still be in place after today because we have a paper one session that will be coming up that will be conducted by a lovely person, Miss Samoya Jones, who is also in the group. I would like to thank you all. Let me now go and pause the recording so any other additional housekeeping matters can be asked. You can always go and look at the Instagram for our page. I would encourage you to follow our page, New JA_Foundation, and you can also go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let me now go and conclude session.